Maybe. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Town of Scarborough. This is November 6, 2024 Town Council meeting. If you could all join me with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Cody, if you could do the roll, please.
Here.
Counselor Cushing,
Here.
Counselor Shu,
Here.
Counselor Hamel,
Here.
Counselor Anderson,
Here.
and Chairman McKee.
Here.
Present.
Thank you very much. We do not have any, oops, I've skipped again. All right, general public comments. So this is for items that are not on tonight's agenda. We ask that you please limit yourself to 3 minutes. There's a little light up there that will blink when your 3 minutes is up. Ask you be respectful, direct all questions, comments to the chair.
Hi, Nina McKee, 309 Black Point. I never knew I was sweet. Thank you for that. This is a really sad meeting. This is sad. The family's breaking up. And, you know, Councilor McGee and Don, I mean, really, you guys have done such a great job for so many years, and not just here, but in the past for other committees and on and on and on, and given all your time. And it's huge. It's huge. And you're going to be really missed. Really, really missed. I'm going to cry. But I have something for you. I don't know if it's proper, but I wanted to give you something as a thank you for being so wonderful and so great. And the residents aren't here all the time, but everybody thanks you. And also, I want to thank Tody for Tody. I want to thank you and all your people that did such an incredible job with that election. And you've done it for almost 30 years, and you're leaving too. You're not going to do it. You're not doing it. So I want to thank you too, but I really hope that you know how much your civility, your intelligence, your kindness, and especially really, Nick, your kindness to people like me who get up and talk. I mean, it's really sweet. You're sweet.
Thank you, Ms. McKee.
So if I could take 1 minute, can I do 1 minute?
Of course. They aren't valued more than $50, are they? Thank you. Oh, thank you, Nina.
Beautiful. You're very welcome. That's the right term. Yeah, thanks very much.
Oh.
Thanks. Thanks, Nina. Thank you. That's awesome. Oh, nice.
This is beautiful.
Nina, you still have 1 minute and 9 seconds left.
Tough act to follow.
Nina, I think I speak on behalf of the entire council when I say it's always a pleasure to have you up there. We don't even have to agree on everything, but you are the sweetest, kindest person, and I love your delivery, and I'm going to miss hearing from you every time we have a council meeting. If you actually make it to the end of this meeting, there is a hug waiting for you. Thank you. Thank you. We still have public comment. Ms. Bristol.
Allison Bristol, Bayview Avenue. I cannot top that. And I don't come with gifts, but I do come with thanks. And I want to reiterate and agree with everything Nina said. I think that we're going to miss Don and Nick greatly on the council. Very big shoes to fill. I was taken, Don has always kind of been, I'm going to say, the financial compass here and reminding us that we have to be transparent to taxpayers with our spending. And his Council Corner Live, his line Our fundamental weakness is appropriating funds without full public deliberation. And that really resonated with me, and I think it is a noble goal to keep that in mind as we're planning for the future. Thank you for standing up for transparency. Thank you for your intention to keep the public informed. And who will replace that important voice on the council? And for Nick, I got to know Nick, well, I first encountered Nick, I should say, when he was the planning board director. But then I had the privilege of serving on charter review committee with him when he was chair with Karen. And not to take away from others on the council, but agreeing with what Nina said, I've always been struck by your style of leadership and your very special ability to meet people from where they're coming from and make anyone feel heard. And especially a lot of times people who stand up here at the podium that maybe are not that comfortable with public speaking. You know, you have a unique gift. So thank you both for your service, and I wish you both the very best. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bristol.
Before I step down, I also have to mention over the last few days, I've had the honor and privilege of serving as a volunteer election clerk for the very first time. It was an amazing experience to witness democracy in action. And at the risk of forgetting someone, I absolutely must acknowledge the Herculean efforts of Tom, Tody, Kristen, Katie, Nicole, Bill, our warden, Cindy is the deputy warden, right? For their tireless efforts in this record-setting election year. Scarborough should get involved, and everyone should do this once, and we should all be very proud of the work that was done. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bristol. I should also make it clear that if the chairman starts crying, the meeting is immediately adjourned. All right?
There's no crying, town council.
They're all counting on you to get us out of here early. Welcome, Marvin.
Thank you very much, Marvin Gates, 423 Black Point Road. I do want to say thank you to the two counselors who are retiring. You certainly will be missed. And I want to congratulate the two that will be, let's see, why am I saying three? Yes, pardon me. I'm missing Mrs. Katerina. Thank you. The three that were elected. And be great to meet them when they arrive. I'm can't top either one of the previous ladies, of course. Almost got me not to stand, which won't bring you to tears, I know. But I would like to take a moment, I'm looking at the election results, to speak in all seriousness about the category known as blanks. And there were north of 12,000 blanks left on the ballots. And it reminded me when I was here a few months ago, and again, in all seriousness, respectfully suggested that you, as difficult as it is for you to consider raising the, whatever you call it, salary of the town councilors. And one of you that evening was nice enough to say, well, what would you recommend as a salary? And I have a few friends in town, and I posed that question, informal survey. And I'm here to report that the general consensus, for your consideration again, was that less than $20,000 a year probably wouldn't put a dent into a person's consideration of what might make a difference, particularly younger people. So that's it. That's to speak to those 12,000 blanks, and that we hope to fill them. And that's my report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gates. Any other public comment this evening? All right, I'm going to close public comment. The minutes of the October 2nd meeting aren't quite prepared yet, so we're gonna skip over that portion of the agenda. We have item number 6, which is an adjustment to the agenda. I have a couple. Resolution 24006, order number 24094, order number 24099. Unfortunately, we did something a little weird and we made tonight's meeting start at 6. However, those 3 entities were all noticed for 7 PM. So I'd like to make a motion to move those to the end of the agenda after order number 24105.
So moved?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor? Sure, that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Treasurer's warrants, I signed those prior to the meeting. And now we're on to the town manager's report. Tom?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a couple things just to brief the council and the public on. Let's start with the school building project update. Councilor Seither and myself just returned from a very fruitful session with the selection committee. We're a subcommittee of the larger school building committee that is tasked with interviewing and selecting consultants to help support the effort. So we had very successful interviews this afternoon, and we'll be making a recommendation and an award so the committee can be fully staffed and really get about the work. The one thing that certainly resonated, and it's nothing new to the committee, is that there's a lot of work to do in a short bit of time. So weeks literally matter at this point. So very pleased to be part of that process. Also pleased just to mention that the committee itself has organized itself in terms of leadership, so they're really ready to go. So very pleased so far with that progress. The Close the Gap project, we did get word from DEP that there's one final piece they're reviewing. It is imminent. I expect at this point it will be late this week or early next week, and our bids are ready to hit the street as soon as we have those state and federal permits in hand. You've heard me mention in the past, a bit of a passion of mine has been obsession, might be a better term, is focusing on the signalization along Route 1. And this has been a project that we've been working on for years. It started in the Dunstan end of town across the marsh. Those signals on the other side of the marsh have been coordinated and using adaptive technology for 5 or 6 years now. And for those of us that live out there, I think you'd agree that there was a noticeable difference at the time, and they work very well. We've since then we have now integrated the ones on the north end of town, and I'm pleased to say the middle section is now connected. So we are complete end to end from Saco to South Portland with a fully integrated adaptive traffic signal technology, if you will. And essentially, these are I'll call them smart lights, in that they use artificial intelligence to appreciate where the demand is and will respond accordingly. Right now, they're in the so-called learning mode, so there will be several weeks of them being fully operational, but they're learning the different patterns, and that will continue indefinitely, frankly. But presumably, they will improve as they learn more about our patterns, whether it's the morning rush hour and when school's in session or whatever might be affecting things. So I mentioned that because I hope we'll all see some relief, and congestion we hope certainly will ease as we improve the efficiency at the intersection. So that's a call out to everyone to just pay attention, be aware, please report your results and your experience. There's no right or wrong answer, just interested in what your experience is. So pleased to make that announcement. I also want to brief the council and the public that Councilor Seither and Anderson joined myself and staff. You may recall some months back when the Downs team, the Crossroads team, was here providing an update. One of the things they kind of hinted at was further potential for partnership for grants, and we had an initial meeting to understand what that might look like. We've got a follow-up meeting tomorrow with them and their consultant, so we'll continue to keep you apprised. I think we appreciate both the developer and the town. If we're able to secure significant federal money, it is certainly a way to get improvements sooner than we can fund them locally. And so at this point, we see it as a venture worth at least exploring. So I'll continue to keep you updated in that regard. Let's see here. I've got a couple of new things I want to add in. I will provide to the council, but we did received notice, complaint filed by Shark Tank Strategies and Platinum Smoke. These are the two cannabis establishments whose licenses were denied. Frankly, this doesn't come as a surprise to us, and I suspect you. Our attorneys have accepted service, and we'll certainly be going through that process. I'll provide you copies of the complaint so you can see it for yourself. That has been initiated. I also want to mention a point that I think I've touched on in the past. The town has some town-owned property off Tibbetts Road. This is up off Broadturn Road. It's the affectionately called the sludge site. It was a site that over years, private septic services and even the Scarborough Sanitary District would on occasion spread sewage sludge on the property, which was a fairly common and permitted process historically. Many of those sites had become known as contaminated with PFAS, and that was certainly always a lingering concern given the historical use of that property. DEP has been identifying sites, and in this case, this is a site that they permitted, so they were well aware of it. They hired a consultant to come in and do a series of soil tests, and I'm pleased to report that everything is within acceptable levels. It's remarkable. I'm not sure how that happened, but very pleased with that result. I do also know that they contacted a number of abutting properties, and in those cases, we're testing private wells. And so I don't know the results of that, but I suspect if there were issues, we would certainly know about it. So I'm just very pleased that, with those results. I also want to mention some staff changes. Todd Souza, for 7 years, has been our Director of Community Services. Later this month will be his last day. He's tendered his resignation. I've regretfully accepted it. Really with mixed emotions. Todd is a tremendous professional and personal opportunity. Todd has been named as the new town manager of Union, Maine, which is close to where he lives. For those of you that don't know, Todd travels to Cushing, Maine and back every day, which is quite a commute. He's in the car 18 or 20 hours a day and here sun up to sundown. So tremendous effort, but it's a great opportunity. And very gratifying for me. Not only is he going into my profession, but more importantly, I've come to appreciate just the importance of developing and growing staff and having them take the next step. And certainly in my profession, it makes it even sweeter. And I'm reminded of Nick Cloutier sitting in the front row here. He's a kind of a constant fixture here. Nick and I have been talking for the last several months. All of us have come to appreciate Nick's many talents. I think the Revale experience is probably the most notable. Nick has a level of ability and proficiency in synthesizing complicated information in understandable format, and that's a real skill and one that I'm looking to maximize. So Nick and I have worked together and come up with some additional responsibilities beyond his assessing responsibilities. Under the title of, what do we call him, Nick? Director of Special Projects. And essentially, I can provide the intricate detail of that, but essentially it's really assisting with any number of financial routines, budget related. The Finance Committee has done a lot of work around capital planning and debt modeling. All of this is clearly in Nick's wheelhouse, and he and Norm have developed a pretty good working relationship. We also would love to have him continue collaborating with Karen to better understand and communicate TIFs and CEAs and their value to us and our taxpayers. And another thing he's interested in is learning more about the legislative process. So with Jean Marie Caterina moving on, we'll need someone to represent our interests on the LPC. And Nick is interested in just starting to widen his glance and better understand the bigger picture of municipal government. So in the coming weeks or months, I'll be asking and suggesting that we appoint him as one of our representatives in that regard. So very pleased to make that announcement and to have him part of the senior team in a different kind of way. Ms. Bristol addressed the election process at the podium last night. Each process is different and unique all to itself. This one was particularly unique just given the turnout and in addition, the huge volume for months now, continuing through and up to 8 o'clock last night, voter registration. It's really added a level of excitement around the process, but a huge responsibility on staff. And unfortunately, last night, with one of our state ballot machines, we were operating 6 of them. Is that right? One of those machines, each has a memory stick that records all the data. Every ballot that's scanned is recorded on a, memory stick. One of them failed, and unfortunately, there's no way to discern in that case ballots that went through that machine as opposed to that have gone through other machines. And so the remedy to that is to rerun all state ballots to do a whole another session. And so starting at 11:20 last evening, Allison was kind enough to stay with us. I think an intrepid team of 12 or so stayed, some of us till 6:15 this morning to ensure that all state ballots were read again. And we apologize for the delay in election results, but it's all related to that process. So Tony and I have not had sleep today, so I probably should have prefaced all of this by, I may ramble, and here I am. But kudos to Tony and her staff, and calm under pressure. This is, it's never easy. There's all sorts of eyes watching. It's huge responsibility. And it's complicated, and you're asked to do high cognitive functioning at the end of a 16-hour day. It's not fair, but they persevere. So great job. And lastly, I just want to congratulate Councilors Hamel and McGee. It's been certainly a tremendous experience. Nick, I really appreciate your style in terms of, as was mentioned at the podium, you've really got a way in terms of just calming the situation, and certainly admire that. And Don, we've worked together 6 years.
Yep.
I'm not sure what to make of your last council comment, where there needs to be a change in leadership. I try not to take that personally, but it's all right.
I left that open-ended.
No, I'm teasing. No, it's you've challenged me all the way along the way, and I'm certainly better for it. So I appreciated you working very closely with us.
You're welcome.
And you're always very open with a compliment, and I've always appreciated that as well.
Thanks, Don.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Tom. Are there any questions on the manager's report?
I had a couple questions.
Sure.
And I'm using a light touch tonight, believe me.
Thank you.
I personally have had bad experience with that intersection at Higas Parkway and Route 1. So in fact, the last one that I had was, you get these flashing lights there, flashing, red lights and green lights. And they were so poorly coordinated that you're in the middle of the intersection and somebody else has a green light, flashing green light. So I just want to be sure that this coordination that you speak of is hopefully will address that particular, take your life in your own hands intersection. I don't see how that could, and I've seen it happen. I've been there more than once where it's done that, and odd hours too, like late at night. So why I'm driving at that hour, don't ask me, but can you speak to that one, please? Thanks.
The one incident I'm aware of, I think I spoke to you within a half hour.
I think
or
you
so.
were there at the intersection.
I did go to the intersection. I wanted to see.
I wasn't looking.
No, in that instance, our crews were on scene. They were actually doing some repair work. The signal in that case went back to a default mode, so it was flashing. I witnessed exactly what you described, near misses, and that was rectified very quickly. So that really had nothing to do with what I was speaking to earlier. This is the sort of information I love to hear. So if you have an experience, please share it.
Thanks. Thank you. That's all I had.
Thanks, Tom.
Any other questions for Tom? All right. Seeing none, we'll move on to the old business section, which is order number 24-089. It's the second reading on the proposed amendments to Chapter 610, Piping Plover Ordinance. And Jamie, if you could kick us off.
I would love to. Good evening. So as you know, this item is an update to the town's existing piping plover ordinance. The ordinance gives the town the authority it needs to comply with our beach management agreement with the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. The ordinance has been in place since 2001. It has not been updated since 2014. The proposed updates are needed for a few reasons. First, to clarify some of the existing provisions in the ordinance, to make the ordinance better align with the updated 2024 beach management agreement, which added lease terms to the agreement and added activities that need to be managed. And it also aims to address challenges that have been encountered over the past several years by our volunteer beach monitors. I quickly want to call your attention to a memo from Chief Holmquist, Todd Souza, and myself that was included in your packet. Public comment has indicated that this ordinance should only be in effect when nesting activity is occurring on Scarborough's beaches. Public safety is responsible for enforcing the ordinance. Community services, park rangers, and our volunteer monitors play a role in educating the public about the town's rules on the beach. And we all feel very strongly that the ordinance needs to include a consistent date when it's in effect. Nesting activity varies from beach to beach and from year to year. As stated in the memo, a set time frame in the ordinance ensures consistency between town beaches and makes it easier for the public to know when and where activities are allowed. In addition, our police officers and park rangers don't necessarily know when nesting activity is occurring on our beaches. It would be a challenge to keep everyone informed of the beach status on a daily or weekly basis. The risk of sharing misinformation would become a challenge for town staff, and a consistent time frame will help staff effectively do their jobs. So thank you for the long process in considering the proposed changes to the ordinance, and I'm happy to answer questions that you have.
Thank you, Jamie. Appreciate it. We have opportunity for public comment on this item. If you'd like to speak, please approach the podium. Same rules as before. 3 minutes, blinky red light.
Did I use up my 3 minutes already? My name is Dave Stahelski. I live at 18 Houghton Street at the beach, at Higgins Beach. I have some concerns with the ordinance as it is currently written, and would ask that the council members consider strongly not to pass it, to make some corrections to it. And these are my observations. You have a letter from me. I think it explains where I come from. This is only going to be a just a highlight. And what I want to explain is that, you know, from at least my perspective, and I'm at the beach a lot. I'm the guy who rakes the beach. I'm the guy who takes care of the sand on the stairs. I'm the guy who puts dog bags in when they don't get all filled. What it is means I'm just there a lot. When I read the ordinance, it becomes very clear that if the birds come early, before April 1, you know, they're protected. They're protected by the federal and state guidelines, and life goes on. Everybody wants this thing to occur, and we want to be a positive influence to what's going on. However, if the birds have fledged before Labor Day, the way this is written, there is all of the I'll call it adverse, but really it's restrictions that are applying to people who use that area remain in place even when there are no birds there. Because at least last summer, July was really the end of the fledging. The leased terns never showed up at all. And the people had to at least adapt their activities. Now, I want to just let you know something. I think this is correct, but it's probably not full. When the leased terns and plovers are in their state of nesting, these things are not going to be allowed. And this is for the area that's everybody sees from the sign on down, at least at Higgins. There is nothing with wheels allowed in that area. That's probably including baby carriages, bikes, running, playing with a wiffle ball, volleyball, flying kites, on a third of the beach, even when there are no plovers there. If there are plovers fledging, or there's no problems with that. Everybody participates. We have other monitors here that'll tell you it's a great effort. But you have to be able to change this so that when they're done, the month doesn't go by. August is the busiest time July, August, the beach is full. And when we create restrictions that stop this from occurring, and my time is almost up, it's going to cause a lot of problems. And when they find out that there are no plovers here, but they're still under the restrictions, I think people are going to be very concerned about it. And I would ask you, if you put it in for July 31st, and if there are still some plovers around, do what we're doing now. The signs are fine. You can make a consistent end date, but it doesn't have to be Labor Day. You're taking out the summer, and you're taking out a lot of concern because people, the beach is limited and it's very busy. So if you would consider that, I'd appreciate it. If you have any questions from my letter, I would be happy to answer. And that's my time, I think.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Dan Perry, and I live at 3 Beach Street, Pine Point, and I'm down in Don Hamels' neighborhood. And I was here, I think in February, when you had the first proposal in front of you. And I was truly impressed when, I think it was Councilor Seither asked for grace because you realized that that bill was not ready for prime time. And I'm here to hopefully convince you that this bill is not ready for prime time. Because even though it went back to the stakeholders and the dog ordinance was written very well, and we got rid of the expansive defined inhabited area, there's still restrictions that are much more impactful than I think that I've seen in conversation about this bill. The other thing in terms of transparency, nowhere do I see in any of the materials that they talk about the impact on running and bicycling and beach going. They talk about that they are updating restrictions for modern equipment, drones, and other things. But for someone who recreates on Pine Point daily, I'm 100 feet from the beach, I walk, run, bike. The restrictions proposed are going to be almost prohibitive depending on the tide. Has anyone mapped out what the area is going to look like when you have a 100 feet beach restriction and it's high tide and I'm coming home from work and there's only 90 feet of beach to run? That means I can't run on my beach at the end of my road. And I ask you why? Because according to the plovers are flourishing. So why are we considering a restriction that's not necessary? Bicycling is basically going to be prohibited, 650 feet. I'm not sure at Pine Point, Don, where we live, there's ever 650 feet of beach. So you're saying my ability to bike is being taken away, and I haven't heard why. Because the plovers are flourishing. I don't mind expanding to add the new bird, but in terms of what are we doing? Do we understand the impact? Has anyone mapped out, based on historical places where the nests are, what the 100-foot radius is going to be and what impact that's going to have on people's ability to recreate? Because we're going to have a dynamic where Old Orchard doesn't have this restriction. People are going to come running down and they're going to be stopped by the bird managers, the bird monitors, and you think that's going to be a good thing for our perspective from a community of the beach. Another thing in terms of, have you understood the impact? Family comes to the beach. They settle 50 feet away from the nest, inhabited area, 50 feet away. The kid runs to go in the water. They are in violation of this ordinance because the kid is running within the 100 feet prohibition. Are we going to take it back? Is the chief going to send his public service officers down there? No, of course not. So why pass an ordinance that we know is not going to be enforced? Because I don't think you understand the 100-foot restriction for running, the 650-foot for biking, 100 feet for jogging. I have no problem with drones that didn't exist. But when you talk about the purpose of this is to update because there were pieces of equipment that didn't exist when the original ordinance was passed, that's not what this does. I see my time is almost up. I'll say this, fact, the plovers are flourishing. They're not rushing through it. I haven't seen a single piece of evidence that the current ordinance is not protecting the ordinances, the plovers. Fact, is quoted in the newspaper, plovers and the beachgoers coexist very well on our beaches. This will upset that coexistence because when I can't run on the beach anymore, other people get interrupted running on the beach or biking. That's not going to make for a tranquil beach. And I just hope that there's a recognition that this is not a simple, small fix. It is a draconian reaction to something that I don't see the reason for. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other public comment on this item?
Glenda Chabot, Houghton Street. First of all, I want to respond to a few of the comments, just briefly. Our birds at Higgins, our plovers fledged the second week of August this year, and that's when we stopped educating regarding the restrictions. And I don't know when it was on Pine Point or Weston Beach was definitely later than that. We had late nesting because we had a wash out nest, so the birds nested later and therefore fledged later. They fledged the end of July, but they're not ready. Fledging doesn't mean that they are up flying in the air. Fledging means they're off the ground inches, and it takes them a few weeks to be able to really get away from predators, et cetera. As far as bikes are already restricted in the beach management agreement, and they have been for years. And that's only, well, that is, I guess, the 650 feet away. Running on the beach is only in the area where the chicks are, and that would only, we'd only educate people about that if there are chicks present and they're in danger of stepping on the chicks. And Jamie said most of what I wanted to say. So I just wanted to say that Scarborough has been very supportive of the piping plovers and the endangered birds. And Jamie Fitch has done a fabulous job as the town's piping plover coordinator. The Conservation Committee and the Community Services Committee have reviewed the revisions, and the suggestions were incorporated into the final draft. And you have received emails from many people supporting the changes in the ordinance, and the recommended changes are based on firsthand experiences and suggestions from many of the beach volunteers, which numbered 80 this year. So a lot of time has been put into this revision, and it has been reviewed and supported by many, and I hope that you will support it tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chabot.
Hello, my name is David Fillinger. I live at 8 Pearl Street in Scarborough. I'm not currently a beach monitor, but I have been a beach monitor for 3 or 4 years in the past. I think a lot of what we're trying to do to change things is not impacting the plovers. The people, the volunteers in general are very kind and try to inform people, but there also is a group of volunteers that are not educating, but they're trying to enforce the rules, and it creates confrontations, just not necessary. And honestly, the people aren't the problem. The predators that are taking, if the plovers have issues, it's foxes, birds. It's not people riding their bikes. It's not people running. It's just, so we're making changes that in essence provide nothing else, no more protection for the birds. So and it ends up, we have a 2-month season, so you're going to eliminate a month of the season for no reason. People spend money to rent places at Pine Point at Higgins, so they should be able to use the beach if they're. And the issue of that Jamie said about it'd be confusing is when they fledge, you take the signs down. It's a 1-day deal. It's not a project that requires anything other than move the signs down and stop showing up at the beach to tell people and let them enjoy the beach. So I would urge you to not make the changes and allow people to use the beach when they're not vulnerable. And if they're fledging or they're flying, we're not the problem. I think the problem is things up in the air or cats or foxes, or that's where the issues happened. And more often than not, it's the tide. So they build their nests and the tides wash them away. So we're creating changes we're not the problem, in my opinion. So thanks.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Anything online? Seeing none, I'm going to close public comment. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right, discussion. Anyone want to kick this off? Counselor Cushing.
Because the plovers have been the defining thing of my first year here, going back to February. And I've just finished reading the book Dark Hollow by John Conley. I don't know if you've read it. It's set here in Scarborough. There's a murder on Ferry Beach, but then he goes up the street to Higgins, and what does he talk about? Others. So they've been following me around. With that levity aside, I happen to agree with the commenters tonight that the spirit of this law, its intention, I think is fine. And it strikes me that 80 volunteers who care enough to go out there and protect these little birds is admirable, and by my hearing, effective. To burden our police department with a law that, you know, puts $100 to a $500 fine, and having people running around saying this is the law, strikes me as not the kind of thing that we want to be doing on our beaches. I am a Pine Point walker, not for the next few months, but pretty much from May until whenever. I learned in my first term that I didn't actually know what a plover was, but I still like them. So my thing here is that we should have laws and ordinances that are enforceable and that are designed to solve a specific problem. I think this ordinance does neither. And so I'm going to vote against it, and please don't scorn me on the beach. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Cushing. Councilor Anderson.
Yeah, you know, I was invited by some of the beach monitors to go out to Higgins Beach and kind of see what the practical impacts of this would actually look like. And I can appreciate the different perspectives from residents. When I was there, I was, you know, what I view as kind of what's new in this, or the things that I'm kind of deliberating in my brain, are adding the structures. And really the intent there was, sometimes there are things on the beach that get piled up that could unintentionally fall on a plover, and then the town would be fined. If a plover falls in a hole and something were to happen to it, the town is going to get fined. If there is somebody running and they accidentally step on a plover unintentionally, that person is going to get fined. And so all of these things were based on observations and experiences from the monitors as a means to try and provide better protection, not only to the plovers, but to the beachgoers, to make sure that they're not at risk for those fines. And so I just felt like that was good to hear that from the monitors, the rationale for why they recommended, and they shared some experiences with me where, you know, they had run-ins with beachgoers where sometimes you need a little bit more teeth. It's not always just about showing up and being kind, and 99% of residents are respectful and get it and get really interested and want to learn more about the plovers. But occasionally there is a need to kind of escalate that to the next step and say, we need to, you know, say that, hey, but this is the law and you do need to, you know, follow the rules. And so I thought that was pretty compelling. I do think the dates, that was always kind of my thing, the dates going from, you know, April 1st to Labor Day felt long, especially knowing that they could fledge earlier than that, especially the plovers. My understanding is lease terns tend to fledge later, so adding them in as a protected species is partly why through August is a necessity. But again, I'm generally okay with the ordinance as it's proposed, but if somebody wants to propose something around the dates to maybe start or have the dates, because that's what I heard from staff, is they want dates, they want consistent dates. I'd be fine with April 1st to July 31st. And then so long as the birds are fledging, you know, we have to continue to enforce the ordinance. So I think that feels reasonable from what the public has said. That seems to be the common thing I hear. So I'm willing to contemplate something like that if somebody wants to put it down as a motion. I disagree with Councilor Cushing in that, you know, we have other ordinances like this where the intent isn't necessarily for the police to be out there enforcing this every day, going out and looking. It's really, I think of like our good neighbor ordinance where, or even our ordinance that we recently worked a lot on for marijuana and odor, where we're giving residents an opportunity to contact the police if and when the situation merits the need or when the resident feels the necessity to do it. So I do feel like this is perfectly consistent with some of our laws that we put into place, and it just gives the monitors a mechanism if they need to. So I'm going to support this. I'm interested in the dialogue to see what other people think. I'm open to other ideas, but the things that I think are the intent behind this and the impact, I think won't be as bad.
Thank you, Counselor Anderson. Counselor Seither, sorry.
I'm also generally supportive of the changes. I think that this has been worked through many committees. It's had a lot of airtime. We've taken a lot of public comment. And so at this point, I don't feel like that this is something that the council should not be taking up for consideration tonight. In terms of being open to considering dates, Counselor Anderson I could potentially be open to that. My concern, however, is, and my concern and my understanding is that if the birds have fledged, then the volunteers' duty is over and they no longer are there monitoring the beach. My concern is that if we compromise with the residents who are feeling like that's too restrictive, which I completely understand, then what happens if they are not completely fledged by by July 31st? We only meet that one time in July. And if this was something that we needed to vote to extend the ordinance to give the monitors the protection that they needed, I'm worried that it's easier to just remove the signs once the birds are gone than it is to try and add a layer of enforcement after the fact, especially given our summer meeting schedule. And so for that reason, I would be concerned about changing the dates. But I think those are my initial comments on this.
Thank you. Counselor Shupe.
So I'm going to be supporting this. I also agree. I think I'm not an expert. So we've heard so much information from the people on the ground, from staff who are experts in this. And so I appreciate their work. I will take their work for what it is. I don't want to touch dates. I don't know anything about this. And so if I agree with Counselor Seither when it comes to, I think it's very important that everyone knows that we have consistent rules and timelines on the beaches and that this is what it is. And if the monitors aren't there, then no one's going to even know that this is an issue going on. I think you're right. We need something more with a little more teeth. I think generally most people are here and they're respectful, but when you have that 1% of people who are out there and literally don't care and they're going to be rude about it, I really think that we need something there to reference and say that this is not okay. And I think as Councillor Cushing said, we are known for these birds. And I think it would be really unfortunate if we had a backslide or something like that. And so I know it does kind of take away some of the use of the beach. I live near Pine Point Beach. I go to Pine Point Beach consistently. I can't use Pine Point Beach at high tide because the tide is so high. I can't run in the sand. I can't even move in the sand. So I'm not quite sure it's going to be as impactful, and I'm hoping it won't be as negative for the people. I really want to respect all of the volunteers and the experts who have put the time into this, and let's see if it can actually work. Thanks.
Thank you, Counselor Shupe. Counselor Hammond.
Yeah, I've been pretty consistent in my position on this, and I tend to align with Mr. Cushing on this. The work has been, I think, very good, and the work is for a good cause that's been done by the good folks over at Higgins Beach. But Higgins Beach does not represent all of the beaches in Scarborough. Okay, there is a 2-mile beach that goes from the jetty in Pine Point down to the line with Old Orchard. Okay, so it's two miles of beach. Grand Beach is called. So, and trying to take something that's not really ready for prime time, even in Higgins Beach, which is a very different beach. It is a private beach that has public access. The beach that I refer to in Pine Point is a public beach, and it has public access, and it's had considerable activity. In particular, this past year has been very busy. Additionally, there are issues of, you've heard the issues of space to to do various things. This year, there's been a lot more surfers down there. There have been a lot more summer people who've come to Pine Point. Traffic has been an issue. It's been much busier. You combine that with the construction that's being done there. If we're thinking about applying this to another area that's A, much bigger, B, has different rules, and C, hasn't been heard from, that is wildly out of place. So I think what we have here again is a good idea, but it shouldn't be expanded beyond a place where it's not really even clear how it's going to work there. So I'd say this is, you got to hear from the folks in Pine Point. There's several ways you can do that. There's a Pine Point Association. We've had issues with algae that further restricts the beach that you've heard about. We just came off a federal decree that required us to do this, and we were under severe penalties for not following that. So I don't think this is ready for prime time for the town. It's certainly not even ready for prime time, in my view, for the community that it's being worked on.
Thank you, Councilor Hamel. So I'm going to actually ask a couple of questions. Jamie, if you wouldn't mind, and then Tody or Tom, I'm going to need some assistance on procedural, just out of curiosity. So before we start voting, we all understand what's going on. Jamie, had there been discussions about alternate ways to have an end date? For example, if something where the beach monitors and, in a joint effort with the Conservation Commission, issue a letter stating restrictions can be lifted. So basically, if you had an ordinance that said it starts April 1st, great, but they're to be lifted once Conservation Commission signs off with the beach monitors that everything's fledged and out of the way. Was there ever a discussion about that?
There was not, and the Conservation Commission isn't heavily involved in the Plover program. So it's really myself and the volunteers that are kind of overseeing it. And the Conservation Commission was asked to weigh in because it is related to conservation, the conservation of a species as opposed to land. But yeah, no, that was not discussed with Conservation Commission. And it would be more of a sign off from Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. I mean, we currently have requirements to have a spotter in front of any of the beach cleaning equipment on Pine Point. And that's supposed to be throughout the season. And once we get word that the chicks on Pine Point have fledged, even though beach cleaning isn't done where the plovers typically nest, we do sometimes have plovers come up from Old Orchard Beach that we need to be aware of on the part of Pine Point that does get raked regularly. Typically within 2 weeks of notice that the birds have all fledged, I will reach out to Maine Audubon and IFNW to get the okay to discontinue the use of a spotter. And typically I get that, but these are endangered species and we need to comply with the federal laws and the state laws that protect them. And that's essentially what this ordinance is doing. And I want to just reiterate, this isn't a new ordinance. It's clarifying some of the restrictions in the ordinance based on our beach management agreement. The police department are already responsible for enforcing the ordinance that is in place. This isn't a new concept. It's just clarifying what we currently have in place and bringing it up to date based on our new beach management agreement and challenges that we've encountered in the past with our volunteers.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a follow-up question?
Councilor Anderson?
So one of the commenters said earlier that if chicks or plover started nesting prior to April 1st, then we would be accountable. So if the date were changed to say July 31st, but chicks are still nesting and we haven't gone to Maine IFDW yet, would we still have to essentially enforce and make sure that we're preventing at least what's in our beach management agreement, all of the factors that are in there?
Yeah, so we have had the instance where, and it's happened the past few years, where the plovers have arrived earlier. The critical dates that have been established by the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife as important for nesting start April 1st, excuse me. So even though the birds we start seeing them on our beaches, they're not necessarily displaying nesting activity yet. They may just be stopping over on their way to another beach farther up the coast. They may be checking out different beaches in the area. That's not necessarily nesting activity, but the IFNW have set the critical date for plovers. Actually, I mean, they would prefer our restrictions go through October 1st. So, because that's an important time for the birds' migration south. We've already backed that out to Labor Day. So yes, birds are arriving before April 1st, but in terms of nesting, the critical time is April 1st.
It's another follow-up question I have, which is, as far as what has been inserted into this ordinance for changes, how much of this is actually exactly what is being forced upon us by either federal or beach management agreements, especially as it relates to setbacks for bicycle, jogging, or those activities? How much of it's in here goes above and beyond what's being required of us?
So the bicycles, the drones, the one wheels, things of that nature, that's required in our beach management agreement. I will say running is not a requirement of our beach management agreement. It is encouraged that running only happen on wet sand, which I think most people only want to run on the wet sand. It's really hard to run on dry sand. So that's an area of potential compromise. I will say this information about beach games, our old beach management agreement only spoke to volleyball. Our ordinance only speaks to volleyball, and it's been updated to be beach games because frisbees, spike ball, volleyball, there are lots of different beach games that are played that, you're throwing a ball, it could land on a chick, and the chicks are literally this big. And again, as was mentioned, part of this is for endangered species protection. Part of it is for risk management for the town, because we become liable as a town if we allow these activities on our beach, because they are endangered, they are protected, and we have a responsibility for the state and federal government to ensure that they're able to nest on our beaches.
And just to clarify, sandcastles, holes being dug, is that part of what is being imposed on us, or is that over and above?
The holes being dug is part of our agreement. At this point, sandcastles, I want to clear up. Sandcastles are fine. The issue there, the definition tried to show that these are really actual hard structures, that people are taking beach debris and driftwood and stacking it up and making things of that nature. It's not intended to restrict sandcastles. And if you read the definition of structure, it's pretty obvious that sandcastles are okay.
Councilor Hamel.
Yeah, so here we are again talking about issues associated with enforcement. And we're talking, and on paper, guess who's responsible for enforcement? Public safety. Our public safety department is overtaxed now, and we're talking about not only expanding the number of things they have to be responsible for enforcing this way horizontally, we're talking about expanding it significantly to the rest of the beaches in Scarborough. And I think that's wrong on two counts. So my suggestion would be you get this stuff, you get it cleaned up, more cleaned up based upon the feedback that you've heard this evening. And we get serious about enforcement. I mean, in other areas, we've hired staff, or there are other ways that we've tried to actually get enforcement done. I'd say get that stuff squared away, get it in a size and shape that people can approve for Higgins Beach, and then decide how you're going to extend it, if you want to extend it beyond that. But doing these kinds of things, I think we should not be committing to things we cannot execute. We cannot, and I know Councilor Cushing and I have had long discussions about this issue of enforcement and going back and forth on it. And I just think our public safety department, will not be capable, or nor is it appropriate for them to enforce this. I mean, I think of other groups like the VIPs who are responsible for enforcing sign ordinances. We've had good success with that. They're also monitors, in the election process. I think we need to think creatively about that and not try to commit them to something that will be very hard for them to enforce.
Thank you, Councilor Hammer. Councilor Anderson.
Jamie, can you just again help us and be clear for the public? What, to Councilor McGee's questioning, what is above and beyond that's in this? that isn't required in our beach management agreement or required by state and federal law? Because I think that's the piece that I want to make sure we and the public fully understand, like where we are contemplating potentially doing a little bit more, which again, I think I've heard reasons why from the monitors, and maybe you can explain that a little bit too.
Sure. Running is not a requirement of our, restricting running is not a requirement. Restricting structures is not a requirement. That doesn't mean that it might not become one, because IF&W did review and provide input into the ordinance language. There is not a set date that is a requirement in the beach management agreement. That was a decision or recommendation by volunteers and supported by staff, because staff are the ones that need to enforce, both educate the beachgoers. Our volunteers do that, but our new park rangers do that and have been pretty successful this year. But it needs to be clear to them when this is in place and when it's not. And again, public safety is currently enforcing this ordinance, and at this point, they will continue to enforce this ordinance unless that changes.
Good question.
Counselor Cushing.
How many citations have we written for Clover violations?
So, as you may imagine, not many. I believe in the past 6 years, there have been warnings given, maybe 3 or 4 warnings given. And I've had this discussion with our animal control ordinance about our dog ordinance as well. As you all know, our public safety are not on our beach all the time. And so if they get a call and they go down to address something, they first try to work with outreach and education and giving people an opportunity to correct the behavior. So they will go down and speak with people about what they are doing and point out, hope if it's in the ordinance. There's been instances where public safety has been needed to be called and it wasn't explicitly in the ordinance, and so there was nothing that they could do about it. And that directly relates to the beach games issue. That's why Inland Fisheries and Wildlife changed it from just volleyball to being more general beach games. And that's why that's proposed in our ordinance, because it has been an issue in the past that our ordinance didn't speak to the activity that was happening. And so our public safety officers weren't able to do anything about it.
One final comment.
Counselor Hamel.
Thank you. And please bear with me, it's my last meeting, so. I'm looking at the chronology here, so, I appreciate all of the work that's gone into this, going back to February 14th of 2024. And I recall each of the steps when we did this, send it back, and we want to learn more. So we've heard, from the town council in June, we've heard from the Conservation Commission, reviewed it, Community Services Advisory Committee, Ordinance Committee is before the town council, but I still do not feel that this has had adequate feedback from the larger area that this is being proposed to be applied to. And I do not think that committee work or any of these other steps we've taken can take the place of trying to understand what the public thinks about it. I don't think that's happened yet. And no matter how good our feedback is and how good the plans are for enforcement, you've heard how few incidents we've had and how few there's been a warning over that same period of time. This is just, it doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense to me. It shouldn't be expanded. I think it needs to go back to committee. I think we need to revisit it and try to get meaningful feedback from the public and not try to substitute our judgment or the judgment from folks at a private beach or a handful of volunteers to tell us what to do about something like this. It's very basic.
Further questions for Jamie at this stage? Jamie, thank you for assisting here.
Sure thing.
Don't go too far. So just want to make sure everyone understands procedurally, there's only 6 of us. So if this ends up in a 3-3, it is basically failed, correct? If it fails, what happens next? is, I want to make sure that, I thought there was some provision somewhere that if something failed, you weren't allowed to bring it back for a period of time. Is that?
Yeah, you're talking about reconsideration. In that case, I don't think it applies in the case of a tie vote and a failure as a result of a tie vote. In reconsideration, a member voting in the prevailing side is entitled to bring a matter back under reconsideration. So I don't think it is eligible under the scenario you described.
I don't think that that is hitting Nick's question. I think Nick is, correct me if I'm wrong, concerned that if this fails this evening, this cannot come back to us in January, for example.
Correct. Yeah, is there anything that prohibits this from being taken back up in January? Okay.
I think what you're recalling is in the instance of an applicant, a resident, making a request for zone change or something of the like, must sit for some period of time, can't continually request the same thing.
That is exactly what I'm
denied.
thinking.
But if it's something that's done by the body or through staff, I think it is eligible to come back whenever it wishes.
Thank you. Councilor Anderson.
So, I mean, I think it's important that we try and move something forward tonight because it's not, while there are some things that I think are holding us up, that I agree with Councilor Hamel, there's no harm in giving more time to public process if we want to go more strict than what's required by the state and federal government. So, or a beach management agreement. So I would like to offer a motion that we remove any language in this related to running structures or the set date from this ordinance. So that way we can hopefully have something that is just very consistent with our beach management agreement and some of the other adjustments that are in here that are, again, to me, more administrative to make it more aligned with other fees and things than have it fail tonight and not have it aligned with our beach management agreement.
Just for clarity, you mentioned running structures and the third?
The setting a set date for its application from April 1st to Labor Day.
I'll second the motion for discussion.
Thank you.
So again, just for discussion, the reason I'm doing this is because there is a lot in here that needs to get addressed as well. And so I'm fine moving a lot of that out by essentially removing the things that I think are going above and beyond. And to Councilor Hamel's point, potentially engaging people in the spring to talk about those particular things and have other things come forward in the future.
Thank you. So as part of that, Councilor Anderson, I do appreciate it because I think for where I sit, there's certain things that we have to do, right? There's no way around it. It's a requirement that we update this and be in accordance with what the federal statutory and the state regulatory agencies are requiring of us. There's no way around it. That said, if it's going above and beyond, that's where my concern lies. And I think if we can isolate the two and have an open, further, deeper discussion on the over and above and the reasoning behind it, I could totally see why running becomes a concern of a beach monitor. Absolutely, because they're about this big and you may not see it, and some people run a lot faster than I do. I could certainly stop myself in time, but not everyone runs as slow as I do. So, right.
Seems to me, if I may, that we're desperate to, pass something, so this will keep going. I mean, so that escapes me a little bit. I would rather, have this cure for a period of time or go away until you want to revisit, or even if it goes down tonight, I wouldn't be concerned about that. You can bring it back up again. But I don't see this as a earth-shattering issue that we need to resolve this evening, and the 2 or 3 things that we're going to try to fix. I think we're dancing on the head of a pin here just to get something passed. I don't feel that compulsion. I won't be here, so I don't feel as though I'm going to miss something by this. And you'll have another group of people who will be able to weigh in on it. Many of the same people will be here. So I just, I don't think this is ready for action tonight. Why don't you just table?
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Shoup.
Sure. So I don't think we're desperate. I think we have an obligation to meet the guidelines and protect an endangered species. And I think we're taking it very seriously as a town. I think Jamie articulately explained what structure meant. I don't think there's anyone pushing back on structure. I think there's a reasoning behind months and months of these organizations and these volunteers putting structures on there. she articulated that this is not sandcastles, this is people pulling woods, this is, people probably tourists and things like that, not realizing the environment they're in and that there is an endangered species. Locals are very well aware of our endangered species. I think we respect our staff and we turn to them consistently for advice and guidance. And we have a memo from 3 senior staff members saying we need timelines. We need a consistent timeline to enforce. I think it's going to create more issues for the staff and for public safety if we take away the dates. And I think we've heard all the reasons behind why they want the dates for the cutting orders.
Council Anderson first, then.
No, I was just gonna say in response, and Karen or Counselor Shoup kind of touched on it, like, this isn't a desperation. We oftentimes update our ordinances based on changes in state regulations, federal regulations. So I don't think there's anything wrong with us making those changes tonight. And I totally agree with you. Like, I trust our staff, I trust the residents. But I get the sense that if we don't make some adjustments, then it's gonna fail. And making at least some of these changes now to allow for more conversation for changes later, I think allows for more public process, allows for more engagement. And so to me, this is like step 1 of advancing this, making it compliant. Step 2 is a broader conversation with more individuals, Pine Point Beach, to figure out, do we need to go a little bit further? So it's not that I'm throwing out these ideas completely. It's just that the time doesn't feel right today. And so I just would encourage us to at least move something forward.
Councilor Cushing.
Feels like we're making some sausage here tonight. I agree with Councilor Anderson that it's been my experience that we have stuff come up here and the explanation is we have to change this because Mother State says we do, and we pass it through and we're done with it. And that becomes the minimum requirement. And candidly, that might have been a great place to start with this so that then we could consider the other issues in isolation and on their merits. So those changes would get my vote, which preserves a compliant, state compliant ordinance, which does expand things. That would allow this to pass this evening, unless I'm misreading the tea leaves here. And that strikes me as a reasonable compromise. So I would vote for that, and respectfully, I was beginning to worry that I was finding too many things to agree with my colleague, Councilor Hamel on. So this would be an added bonus.
I'm not looking for a goodbye kiss, okay? Believe me. Yeah. So let me respond to this one more time. So if we pass these adjustments that everyone is so intense on getting done, that, correct me if I'm wrong, those changes will mean this applies to all of the beaches in Scarborough.
The ordinance currently applies to all beaches in Scarborough, and it will continue to apply to all beaches in Scarborough.
But your suggestion that, yeah, I've heard you say a couple of things, but people really prefer running on the soft sand when the tide is high.
No, I said no one wants to run in soft sand.
You did say that. Okay. That did sound a little crazy to me. I just don't think this is ready for prime time. I really don't. And I hear what you're saying, they apply, but we're not really enforcing them. We've had one incident in one period of time. I just think we're going back to something that I've lived through this, okay? The years where we had this federal, decree in place, and the folks in Old Orchard Beach didn't give a hoot about it, and we were on the hook with the feds. So I know our history is a little bit different, but I'm sorry, I just don't share those feelings with everybody else. And I think that you're really going to hear it once this starts getting implemented in Pine Point, and folks would rather hear about short-term rentals or what we're going to do about vulnerability and resiliency plans and other things like that. And what are people going to do about sea level rise? And we're going to be worried about, well, you can't do that because we got to watch out for the plovers and the lease terms.
Councilor Sather.
I think Councilor Anderson's amendment goes too far for me. But I am willing the senior staff has asked us for dates, that is something they have made clear that they need in this ordinance is those dates. And so removing those dates, the spirit of what we're doing is compromised, but we're basically asking them to come back to us with a proposal for dates. And maybe that the timing of that is for the new council. And so for that purpose, I will support the amendment if it means that we can still comply with our federal regulations with the understanding that this has to come back to us, the new council, for consideration.
For what it's worth, I would agree with Counselor Seiler here where we have to get the minimum done. There's no way around it. So with this amendment, I believe we get there. It also allows you to really have a finite conversation. You can actually say, we need to discuss dates in public. We need to discuss, the fines or, not the fines, I'm sorry, running structures. Here are 3 things we need to have an open, honest discussion about. Have that with your new council. Have it when you have 7 members present, not 6. And that's just, I think, a wise move. That would be my suggestion. So
Just one question, if I understood the rationale for the amendment with 3 parts, it was to remain compliant with all other existing, particularly the beach management agreement. But I believe there are dates, certainly included in the beach management agreement. So I just wanted to make sure that you're aware of that. I can't quote what those dates are.
we have a red line version, right?
I don't believe the beach management agreement is part of the packet.
Well, this is a red line. So there should be, the beach management, I'm sorry.
So I was
Um,
speaking to the counselor's amendment, and his suggestion was for it to be compliant with other related documents.
In the beach management agreement, it reads, the agreement is in effect from April 1st through the day after Labor Day when nesting activity is occurring, which is defined as when territorial pairs, nests, and chicks for piping plovers and or least terns are present.
Mhm.
So I'm happy to modify my amendment to strike the dates and replace it with that language specifically directly from our beach management agreement, just so that it is consistent. I don't know what I have to do to modify my
We should probably just vote on, vote your amendment down and then you can make another amendment.
Okay.
Oh,
If that-
gosh, I think you can make a friendly amendment to your
You're
own.
the second, if you're willing to.
You're the parliamentarian here.
I think John should restate
Restate.
his amendment.
I would
And
like to
we all follow.
restate my amendment to remove the recreational activities related to running and reference to structures and replace the language related to dates at the beginning to be aligned with the following language that's in our current beach management agreement. This is in effect from April 1st through the day after Labor Day when nesting activity is occurring, which is defined as when territorial pairs, nests, and chicks of piping plovers and least terns or least terns are present.
So I'm going to clarify that as structures, running, and dates that align with the current beach management agreement.
Correct.
There is a request to clarify that running will also include jogging. So running and jogging would be removed from
Yes.
Yeah, that
the ordinance.
included in the same phrase.
So can I ask a procedural question or point of information? We're referring to a beach management agreement. We're making changes to that. We're linking this document to that. Shouldn't that be in front of us if you're going to be approving this thing? We're going back and forth. Okay, so why is that not here? And if it's not here, you ought to have a meeting in which you're able to look at both of those and review both of those and make sure we're talking about the same thing. I don't see that in here in this package.
I'm sorry, that is an oversight.
Excuse me, sir. This is our time to speak. Thank you.
The amendment
That's okay.
stated
Just make it
does
very
not
interesting.
amend the beach management agreement. It's simply, he's referencing it in support of his amendment.
But if it helps to enforce what you're proposing here, and all these revisions you're talking about are gonna save this for history and posterity, then it ought to be in here. It ought to be with this package. So I suggest you postpone this thing until you get the go forward council to look at the whole thing, so we know what we're talking about, instead of hopping back and forth between documents and doing it real time, and hopping back and forth between parts of the beach that's gonna apply to.
So Council Hamel, I think that's a point well taken. I do. I will say this, though. I don't think it changes how I feel about the overall situation, which is I want to see us comply with the federal and state regulations. This amendment that's being offered up is basically essentially taking us to that point. And that's what we're asking for. Having that other document in front of me isn't going to change my mind about whether or not we need to at least meet the imposed regulations upon us. That would be my response to it. I think you're right. It would be nice to have that in our packet tonight. However, it doesn't change the fact that we have to comply. So with that, we have an amendment on the floor. Without further discussion, I'm going to call a vote. All in favor of the amendment? All opposed? Okay, the amendment carries. Now we're back to the main motion as amended. Discussion on the main motion as amended. Seeing none, I'm going to call the vote. All in favor? Opposed? Show that as 5-1. Thank you. I would like to entertain a motion to move item number, resolution 24006, which we had moved to the back of the agenda. I'd like to move that up to our next item.
So moved?
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? I have 5-1. So we are going to move on to resolution 24-006. This is an act request to recognize the high school boys golf team. And what I have here is a resolution. I'll read out loud. Coach, after I read this resolution aloud, what I'd like to do is invite each of the players up here. We have a small gift to give them, and then I'd like to present you with a resolution and allow you to take the podium and just say a couple words about your team. Okay? So, all right. Resolution 24-006, Scarborough High School Boys Golf Team. Be it resolved by the Council of the Town of Scarborough, Maine, in the Town Council assembled that whereas the Scarborough High School Boys Golf Team did invest many hours of training and preparation for the 2024 State Boys Golf Championship, and whereas the Scarborough High School Boys Golf Team did compete and win the 2024 State of Maine Class A Championship, and now therefore it be resolved by the Scarborough Town Council and Town Council assembled that the following members of the Scarborough High Boys Golf Team and their coaches are hereby recognized for the great honor they have brought to their team, their school, their families, and the town of Scarborough. The Scarborough Town Council is proud of their efforts and hard work. I'm going to read now the names of the players, and if you just come up one at a time. I have freshman Ethan Skillings. Sophomores Joshua Albert and Charlie Stringer. Junior Brent Kemper. Junior Thomas Ocampo. Junior Andrew Sawyer. Senior Grady Burnell. Senior Keenan Buto. Senior Eric Swenson. Senior Mark Twombly. Senior Camden Ziga. Head coach Michael Murphy. This is signed and sealed the 6th day of November, 2024 on behalf of the Scarborough Town Council and Town Manager of Scarborough, Maine. Is there a motion to accept that resolution?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. Show this unanimous. Here's your resolution, sir. Sign it in a second. All right. In the meantime, if you wouldn't mind gracing us with some words and afterwards, maybe you guys could take a quick photo up here.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Terrific year for the kids. It's been an unbelievable 4 years for the seniors. We've been knocking on the door to winning this thing. I think we've had a runner-up, second place, third place, and a fourth place, and finally came through this year. But more importantly, we've got tremendous kids who show so much integrity, just being really classy, represent their families, their school, and the town in a great way. Very proud of them. The golf is obviously, we've been very good, and we've been blessed to have some talented players over the years. But I'm mostly proud of the way these guys handle themselves out there in the public. Golf's a tough game, and it really brings out your character when things aren't going your way. And I always tell the kids, I don't want to see by your body language how really you're doing. You know, if you're struggling, keep it to yourself. If you're great, be humble. And these guys were really terrific. Mark Trombley was the individual state champion for the second time in 4 years, which is really quite impressive. Keenan Buteau was third in the Winglands a couple of weeks ago, which is really quite impressive. So we had some great individual accomplishments amongst the team, but really the team, this is my 36th year coaching, and we've been up to the state championship 20 times, and it's not a given to get there. It's tough to get there. But this is the first group of all 12 kids who all showed up for the state championship. It's a long day. If there's usually 5 of us or 6 of us playing, and the other 6 over the years, I got to work, I got to take SATs, I got, whatever. There's all legit. But this group, they were there cheering on their teammates like no other, like it was a basketball game or a football, baseball game. Really tremendous. It was I'm honored to coach these guys, and it's a bummer that it's only 8 weeks long and it's over. And I felt the kids felt the same way. So extremely proud of these guys, and I thank you guys for this honor. So thank you very much.
Please have you take a quick picture in front of the dais here. Congratulations, guys. Gentlemen, before you go too far, we've had an inquiry come in online. Who hits the ball the furthest? This guy. What's the yardage on that? You hit 300 yet? 320. Woo! All right, back to our regular scheduled programming. We are on to order number 24100, act on request from the police chief to accept donations from the following. First Congregational Church in the amount of $700 to be provided directly to the social services team, and Prouts Net grant in the amount of $900 to fund the purchase of the thermal range finding binoculars used by the Marine Resource Officer. Chief Holmquist, thank you for being here.
Good evening. You pretty much stole my thunder and I'll keep it short. Not much to add to this, but I just want to appreciate, first and foremost, the First Congregational Church for that generous donation, as well as the efforts by our Marine Resource Officer, Darren Granata, to be able to apply for and successfully be awarded this grant from the Prouts Neck Association for the amount of $900 to purchase much needed gear for him to accomplish his mission. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have opportunity for public comment on this item. If you're here and like to speak, please approach the podium. Seeing none, I'm going to close public comment. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Shows unanimous. Thank you very much. Congratulations, Chief. Order number 24101, act on the request to amend the credit enhancements policy as recommended by the Finance Committee. Counselor Anderson, do you want to
sure.
do a quick summary on this one?
Yes, so I think when this council first sat, we had a CA request come before us from for 3i Home Housing, and I think through that effort, we realized that our policy only really contemplated economic development CEAs, and it didn't really distinguish the difference between housing. So we ended up making it a goal for the council that we revisit our TIF CEA policy and make adjustments so that we're better delineating between the two and making sure that the policy is clear. So this policy came to the Finance Committee twice. It went to SEDCO and it went to the Housing Alliance. And so really what this is trying to do is really be clear on the two separate paths the council may need to go, so that if you have a major economic development CEA request, it goes one path. If it is a housing project, it goes a separate path. Again, there's a lot of similarities process-wise in terms of what needs to happen, just slightly different bodies that are engaged. And really the intent is to help give us a tool to better assess these projects as they come forward and leverage some of the financial modeling and make sure that we're holding the applicants to similar standards. So that's essentially the intent behind it. It was really, again, some cleanup on the current policy in addition to really adding in more detail on what we would do for an affordable housing project that requested a CEA.
Thank you, Councilor Anderson. We do have opportunity for comment from the public. If anyone would like to speak, please approach the podium. Ms. Bristol, welcome.
Thank you. Again, Allison Bristol, Bayview Avenue. I was really surprised to see this on the agenda tonight as an action item without any public input or communication at all, and most especially in regard to proposed policies around affordable housing. I haven't taken the deep dive in this because I've been processing ballots, but there are a few things that jumped off the page from Karen's cover memo and the proposed policy amendments. And they are, and again, I haven't taken a deep dive, if only 33% of housing units need to meet state requirements for, are needed to make requirements for affordable workforce housing, does the developer get a CEA for the other 67%? No cost to serve or shift benefit analysis required for projects under 2 million, especially if it's located in the Downs. So as an example, the 3i project in the town received a 50% CEA from the town, which I think was worth $1 million over 25 years, plus another 200,000 from the Housing Authority, plus the Downs 40% CEA. So would the combination of all three not be subject to a cost to serve or a shift benefit analysis? For any housing component of an affordable housing CEA, Autumn would advise on the availability of affordable housing permits. Since the pool of 100 every 3 years can be replenished at council's discretion, they are in essence limitless. If the Downs is pulling 51 from the pool, outside of their allotment of 400 over 3 years, those 51 for the 3i project can easily be replenished. None of this has had any public process. I'm going to go back to Councilor Hamill's comment that our fundamental weakness is appropriating funds without full public deliberation. This is Scarborough taxpayer money. It's not found money for the town to use at its discretion. It's taxpayer money. And surely the council doesn't expect the general public to regularly pay attention to finance committee meetings. I have also found from my own experience that Housing Alliance meetings are generally not hybrid meetings made available to the public when they're live. So at the very least, I would ask council to take a step back, communicate with the public, and ask for input on policies you are creating that have financial impact. At the very least, I would hope you'd schedule a workshop. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bristol. Any other public comment? Seeing none, I'm going to close public comment. Is there a motion?
So moved?
Is there a second?
Second?
Okay, discussion. So for what it's worth, this is pretty meaty. This is just my 2 cents. This is pretty meaty. And I've gone through and I made over a dozen notes with questions and maybe points of clarification. And to Ms. Bristol's talking point, I do believe this probably deserves more public time and probably a workshop and a deeper dive. I'd be happy to turn over my notes because I know I won't be sitting on this side of the table, so I can turn over my thoughts or maybe even attend the workshop and join from the podium. But I do think that would be a good move for something this involved.
So I agree. I think it's important, like to Ms. Bristol's point, when we start saying the word CEA, it has connotation to it. But I think it's good for us to give the public some time. I like the idea of a workshop to have Karen, maybe the Housing Alliance, Stedco come talk through some of these things. Again, really just to give the public more information, the council more information, and even considering maybe a first read and a second read attached to it, even though policy changes only require one action. So I think that's something that the next council chair and vice chair can work with Tom, if it's the will of the council, to potentially table this tonight to allow for more public process.
Councilor Cushing.
I agree.
Councilor Hamel.
Yes, I
Hear the
agree.
head nod.
I agree emphatically. Thank you.
So I would like to make a motion to table to allow the next council to discuss and implement more process to this particular policy change.
Second?
Excuse me, it should be tabled to a date certain, so we'll, when it comes back.
I would table it until at least our February meeting.
First meeting in
First
February.
meeting in February,
Thank you.
February 5th.
Second.
Discussion?
No discussion.
No discussion. Oh, man.
Sorry.
I had like 2.5 years to learn that.
All the vote.
All in favor of tabling? Opposed? I show that's unanimous. Thank you. And for what it's worth, I'm going to make the same recommendation on this next one. Order number 24102, act on the request to amend the fiscal policy as recommended by the Finance Committee. Councilor Anderson.
So again, as we were doing our annual policy review where we have to look through the whole policy, there were two things that we worked on this year. One was to amend our policy to make it an aspirational goal that we want to get to 16.6% as part of our unassigned fund balance. So that is best practice. That is what the credit rating agencies want to see. And so we tried to make that a clear policy objective for the council that we strive to get there. And again, that won't be something that will happen immediately, but it's something that we should strive to achieve. That will help with our debt rating going forward, knowing especially that we have some large potential bonds coming our way. And so that's the key metric of the 6 that they look at. That's the one we can influence. That's going to hopefully maintain our credit rating. So that's a little bit attached to the other amendment, which was to be clear when we state in our policy, we wanted to maintain the highest rating possible. We felt like that wasn't clear what that really meant. So the desire was to provide more definition to indicate that when we set that target, we're really talking about maintaining a high grade, a high rating, which is defined in the appendix. So those were just two policy adjustments that we worked through this year that we wanted to bring to the council.
Thank you, Councilor Anderson. There's opportunity for public comment on this. If you'd like to speak, please approach the podium. Seeing none, I'm going to close public comment. Is there a motion?
So moved?
Second.
Discussion? Counselor
Aye.
Cushing?
I think that the changes to this one are really clarifications that help us understand what we're doing. And I think that if we could probably dispense with this one tonight, they're not major overhauls. I think they're fixing some areas of ambiguity to better capture what the intent is, which is to keep our bond rating. I forget exactly what the level is, but we can now look at a chart and say, this is where we would like our bond rating to be. Now, somebody can come back at that later and say, we'd like it to be higher or lower, but that's a whole lot clearer than saying, well, we just want to have a good credit rating. So I think that with respect to public involvement and more hearings and so forth, it feels like to me we could dispense with this one tonight. And if people feel like we need to come back at the policy for other reasons, we can certainly do that.
For my just 2 cents from reading it on the surface, seemed all very reasonable. But I got to caveat that with, I don't actually understand what impact this might have overall long term. Like, I don't know. I remember we had our bond guy in one time and there was a whole financial analysis provided to us. There was, here are indicators that move your bond ratings up and down. It was quite involved and it was interesting. I just didn't know if something like this has a larger impact than I'm seeing on the surface. Because I would agree, on the surface, this is like, yeah, seems pretty straightforward. But I don't know if I 100% feel that comfortable, like knowing that and maybe you as a finance committee had that conversation and, you know, it had some of that information provided. Norman's chomping at the bit to get up here. Norman, if you could assist just a little bit here on educating us on the impact of moving this to the 16.67.
Thank you. GFOA, who it gives governments worldwide advice and guidance on policies and practices, they recommend 2 months worth of expenses be retained in your fund balance. And that's where we get to the 16.67 rate. Gives you 2 months, gives you as a body enough time to react to shocks in your system, to expenses or revenues. On the bond ratings front, the more fund balance you have, the better your likelihood of having a high investment grade rating is going to be. There are other factors that the rating agencies look at, but this is an important one to them. So it behooves us to improve our fund balance as much as we possibly can.
Point of information, I just like something I learned in this process too was, you know, the reason why we set the policy the way we did before was partially due to the Haggis Parkway TIF and the liability that we had, which made making progress on this a little bit out of reach. But we are positioned now strongly as a town to be in around that 12% mark. So, you know, I think it's fiscally responsible for us to, now that we're ready to advance. And again, that 16.67 is a target to try and get to. It's not one we will get to tomorrow, in the next 3 to 5 years, perhaps, but to push to try and get there is really to try and follow best practice. And so that's the intent behind this, is we're better positioned to go higher. So we're going higher, and really we should be striving to achieve that 16.67 in the long term.
Councilor Hamel.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with, taking this to the figure that John is speaking to, but it does raise the broader question of our having a broad understanding of, the debt levels that we have and then what's appropriate. I mean, for example, is there a public sector equivalent or, a town equivalent, municipal equivalent of a debt to equity ratio. Do we have anything like that? Because, you know.
Well, your fund balance would be your equity, so, and it's governmental practices to measure it against your revenues or your expenses, not your assets, because your general fund typically doesn't carry a lot of assets.
So what would that figure be? Do you know that off the top of your head, or debt to? You said expenditures?
Well, your debt service, the best practice is, not over, 15% of your, general fund expenditures.
And is that where we are?
We are below that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anyway.
And we are, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, you go ahead.
We are not only below that, but we, in the past couple of years have actually been on a decline because our sporadic, cycle of, issuing new debt.
So my suggestion here is that the more that we can kind of try to educate the public, because there's a perception that we have figures that are way out of whack, to try to show them how, what they really look like and what the trends are and what that means. I know that you had mentioned in the past that in your quarterly reviews that you don't really have the capability to do that analysis, but I think that would be very helpful for us as a, not only as a council, but also as helping to educate the public as to what the real facts are, so that there is either a comfort or anxiety level, however appropriate, in terms of where we stand on those things. Anyway, but I'm.
And I was gonna say, in the exposure, if we actually do pass this tonight and 2 meetings from now, you're like, whoops. It's a policy that you guys can bring right back up and change the number. That makes me feel a little bit better. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just want to respond to Council Hamill's comment, because part of the modeling that we did to look at the long-term capital projects, we did look at other metrics that are important. And again, trying to make sure we really understood the fiscal impact to those other metrics, like the debt per capita and things like that, that are important in informing choices from a long-range capital facilities planning perspective. So I think that work is happening, and it's happening in the committee, and it's important. I agree with you, like, as that effort advances, we all need to get a little bit, and the new council needs to get a little bit more read in on those things to make sure we fully have a full understanding of financial choices we make, especially for these big projects in our debt, and what that means for our bond rating and fiscal health. So maybe I'll be council. Yeah.
Just to put in historical perspective, for as long as I've been in Scarborough, this particular financial metric has been a point of discussion and point of interest. We've heard through successive finance committees, discussion around the topic, never been in a financial position to actually do it. And I believe we are now, and I think it's about raising the bar higher for ourselves. We've also heard general support from public comment, at least at the finance committee level. This is a point of area of focus that we've heard from the residents as well. Great.
And a reminder, the policy does include a provision that if we fall below our minimum, that we are required to come back with a plan to get it back above that.
No further discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Sure, that is unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Norman, thanks for the assist on that one. All right. Next is order number 24103. Act on the request to remove approval on names posted to the various committees and boards by the Appointments and Negotiations Committee at the October 16th, 2024 Town Council meeting. Councilor Shoup?
Thank you. So we have some great volunteers that we want to get started. So we are recommending that for the Coastal Waters and Harbor Advisory Committee, that we move Robert Odlin from the first alternate to a full voting member with a term to expire in 2026. Move Tyler Davis from the second alternate to the first alternate with a term to expire in 2025. We move to appoint Brittany Jackson to the second alternate with a term to expire in 2026. On the Conservation Commission, we are recommending to appoint Kate Borduis, did I say it right?
Yes.
As the second alternate with a term to expire in 2026. Community Services Rec Advisory Board, we're moving to appoint Daryl Wright to the second alternate with a term to expire in 2025. On the Long Range Planning Committee, we are recommending to appoint Mark Simpson to the first alternate position with a term to expire in 2024. On the Planning Board, we are recommending that Bennett Flanders moves from the second alternate to the first alternate with a term to expire in 2026. and to appoint Rudy Karen as the second alternate with a term to expire in 2024. Finally, we have the Shellfish Commission, and we are recommending to appoint Andy Blanchard as the full voting member with a term to expire in 2026. We're recommending to appoint Jason Cork as a full voting member with a term to expire in 2025, and recommending Eric Cork as a first alternate with a term to expire in 2026. And that's it.
Thank you. We have opportunity for public comment on this item. If you'd like to speak, please approach the podium. Seeing none, I'm going to close public comments. Is there a motion?
So moved?
Second?
Second.
Discussion?
Sorry.
All in favor? Opposed? Shows unanimous. Thank you very much. Order number 24104, it's an act to authorize the use of fiscal year 2025 overlay funds in the amounts of $13,526 for the purpose of fully funding the Senior Property Tax Assistant Program. So I think I can try to tackle this best I can. We had voted, I don't know if all of you remember, I'm sure you do. We increased the amount of eligibility from 50,000 to 60,000. We weren't 100% sure what those numbers would come back looking like because we don't have accurate income levels for everyone that resides in town. So we had a few more applicants than we anticipated. And we had originally intended to give $1,000 back to people with incomes under 60,000. What we found is if you were to take the budgeting amount that we had in there, we have a shortfall of about $13,526. If you, the ordinance goes on to state that if there is a shortfall, we can either address it in this manner by funding it here, or we can actually just divide it equally amongst the recipients, which would give everyone about $970-ish. So I think those are our choices in front of us, which is if this fails, basically everyone by ordinance is going to get $970. If we pass this evening and fund it with the extra 13,000, then everyone would get the full 1,000 that we had intended. So
I'll just add that council leadership expressed interest in at least bringing the matter to council's attention with a proposed solution. And when asked where those funds would come from, I'm recommending it would be from the overlay account. You may recall the assessor has a fairly sizable, I make it sound like it's his, but there's a fairly sizable overlay account this year, taking into account the revaluation. In fact, we don't expect to use much of any of that. So there's adequate funds there, and I'm very comfortable in recommending that as a source.
Thank you. So we actually have opportunity for public comment on this item. If you'd like to speak, please approach the podium. Seeing none, I'm going to close public comment. Is there a motion?
So moved?
Second.
Discussion. Councilor Anderson.
I think this is a great idea, but glad you guys did this. I think every dollar counts right now for people who need assistance. And again, kudos to Nick for doing such an awesome job. That overlay fund was quite sizable that we put in the budget this year. So I think 13,000 is a tiny percentage of it. It would all go to our unassigned fund balance anyways. So that we don't use. So I think it's good to use it in this format, and it's not a lot.
Councilor Seiler.
Yep, I'm really proud of this program, and this was something that, as a council, we made a priority. And so making sure that the account is fully funded is important to me. And I think that this is an appropriate use of the overlay account. And so I'm in full support of this.
Councilor Hamel.
Yeah, every bit helps. Okay, so I would support this completely. This does, however, highlight a group of people who are under extreme pressure in terms of what's happened to property appreciation in Scarborough. So there is so much more here that needs to be done. And what I'm concerned about, especially with these policies that we have, like the ones we referred to earlier that you're going to be working on later in more detail. But I think these areas that are in which we're going to be stimulating and incentivizing greater percentages of workforce and affordable housing. I think that we need to take a very hard look at that. I know there's a lot of policies that govern each of these agencies that provide this type of service, including Avesta and others. However, I believe we should consider doing something like making sure that we have that a percentage of folks that get placed in affordable and workforce housing that is equal to or reflects the percentage of those folks in our population. And I would think it's safe to say, I'm guessing, but I have a good feeling that that is not what happens. That those funds go to other people, not necessarily folks that are here who are really under severe pressure. So I'd ask for someone to take a look at that, if possible, and I may drop a line every now and again to, as a reminder, but I think there's just so much more that needs to be done there, and I don't think we're doing our part.
Thank you, Councilor Hamel. Councilor Cushing.
I agree with everything everyone has said. I think if we did it the other way, I have a little experience with that. I once promised a whole lot of people a bonus of a fixed amount if we achieved the goal. And when they got their checks, the taxes were taken out. What they remembered was not the fact that they got a gross amount of 500. They remembered that I didn't keep my promise. And so I think that doing this will have the dual benefit of helping those additional people and not having to deal with the perception that we didn't keep our promise.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to make a kind of historical note or observation, I should say. Over the 18 years, this program, and it has modified over time. Initially, it was in alignment with the state circuit breaker program. And then more recently, in the last 10 or 12 years, we have a local ordinance that's based on our own parameters and requirements. And then through those years, you've chosen to modify that policy in any number of ways. At this point, we're now reaching and supporting a total of 472 people in town. And the total cost to support that program this year is $458,880. It's a tremendous program. You should all be proud. It is by far and away, to my knowledge, the most substantial program of this type in the state. So again, be proud of that. A cautionary note is, we're approaching $500,000 of really redistributing tax dollars. And so I'm not at all suggesting that we reverse this, but I think just going forward, we need to be just mindful that there's a fiscal note associated with these matters.
Fair enough. Okay, with that, all in favor? Opposed? Show that as unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next item on our agenda this evening is order number 24105. It's an act on the request from the town clerk to certify the results of the municipal and general referendum elections that were held on Tuesday, November 5th, 2024. Tony.
Thank you. I'd like to present the following for certification by the town council. We have the town council, 3-year term for 2 seats. We have Scott Doherty that had 7,559 votes. Corey Fellows, 7,962 votes. I'm going to have to use her nickname, Cece Mauer, received 6,316 votes. The top 2 vote getters were Mr. Doherty and Mr. Fellows. Town council, one seat available. This is to fill a term that will expire in 2026. Mr. William Donovan received 11,228 votes. For the trustees for the sanitary district, this is a 3-year term. We have Nick Rico receiving 10,379 votes and Michael Stein receiving 10,014 votes. The Board of Education, special election for that seat. This is a term that will expire in 2026. Mitchell Rockenstein received 10,129 votes. We had 3 referendum questions on the ballot. The first question was regarding the body worn cruiser cameras. The yes vote received 9,991 votes. The no vote received 4,336 votes. Question 2 was the purchase of a fire pumper truck. The yes votes received 9,412 votes. The no votes were 5,042 votes. The bond question, question 3 was the land bond fund. The yes votes received 8,902 votes. The no vote was 5,381. We have approximately 18,511 active voters on our rosters for this election. That did not include the same day election day. We registered about 700 people yesterday at the polls. We were very busy. There were about 15,270 voters that cast ballots yesterday. And of that 9,895, we received absentee ballots back. That comprised about 53% of our votes cast. Overall election turnout was 82%, which is great. It was busy all day long. I mean, it was really nice to see people coming in and doing your voting.
Thank you so much, Tody.
Certification of the election.
We have public comment on this item?
Sure can.
All right. Anyone want to speak? Seeing none, I'm going to close public comment. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Right. I'll just say, wonderful job again. I can see the exhaustion in Tom's face. You have kept it together wonderfully. I have no idea how you do it, Tony. So congratulations to you and the team and everyone that chipped in to make this happen. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to echo that. I mean, that was, there were long lines everywhere and, you know, the volume of people that came in, it was incredible. And, you know, I had a chance to speak to the warden. That's just his last tour of duty here in Scarborough. So to everyone who worked there and all the efforts that they took on how they handled things along the way and the general tone and comportment was terrific. No issues at all. You know, it didn't seem like there were any conflicts at all. So that's a testimony to the system.
All right. All in favor? Opposed? Sure, that's unanimous. Thank you again. Next item on our agenda this evening is order number 24094. It's a public hearing and action on the following new request for a liquor license from Jossie Papakalu, DBA Stack Scarborough, located at 183 US Route 1, tabled from October 16th, 2024 Town Council meeting. Tony.
Yes, this item was tabled from our last meeting due to the fact that we had an issue trying to contact the owner to do an inspection. The final inspection has been conducted. It was done on October 30th, and the owner did receive their occupancy permit. And with that, we recommend approval of the license.
Thank you. We have opportunity for public comment on this item. If you'd like to speak, please approach podium. Seeing none, and close that. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Sure that is unanimous. Thank you very much.
Missed an opportunity to say snacks.
Order number 24099. It's a public hearing and action on the following new request for a combined massage establishment massage therapist license from Kendra Monroe, DBA Kendora Healing, located at 4 Stewart Drive, Unit 2. Tony?
This is a new application, and as required by the ordinance, that any new applicants must come before the council for approval. We found that everything is in order and the application is not on file for review if the council wishes to do so. We recommend approval.
Thank you. We have an opportunity for public comment. If you'd like to speak, please approach the podium. Seeing none, I'm going to close public comment. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? So that is unanimous. Thank you very much. We are now into non-action items, my favorite category, because I found something to put into non-action items. Here with me is a plaque for one Donald R. Hamill. And this is in recognition and appreciation for your outstanding dedicated service to the town of Scarborough as a member of the Scarborough Town Council from November 2018 to November 2024. So Don, I think it was said earlier by one of the members of the public, there's going to have to be a role on the future council for the 3 new members coming in and from the existing membership we have here to take up that mantle of the finance side of things, because keeping a keen eye on the finances was Don's wheelhouse. And he let you know about it. And I don't think we can overlook that. The other thing is this process, and process is not a bad thing. And Don, until you're blue in the face, I'll hear you say, what about the people? And you know what, if that's where you come from, that's a good spot to start. So with that, I'd like to present this plaque to you and say congratulations and thank you for your service.
Thank you. Time's gone fast. I mean, I did the math here and I figured that, what is it? 6 years is 8.8% of my life. So, you know, and there's, you know, that's a pretty big denominator. So this has been very, very rewarding for me. And I retired and I have been devoting full time to this, which is not possible for many people. And it's a nuisance, I'm sure, to other folks. But in that time, it's just been really gratifying. Getting to know people better, getting to know old friends better and making new friends. And the way we started, I think, we were part of you may not remember this, others may not. But I joined up with a group called Road to Renewal in 2018. And it was pretty controversial because it involved a recall and it involved a change of the school superintendent. It led to many things. And one of the things I think that was a factor that started then, that been built on year after year, is just more and more transparency, more involvement of committees. You've seen it tonight with the piping flow. We were saying, sometimes I think we've created a monster, but it is really for the benefit of the public and for the benefit of our decision-making. So I really encourage everybody to carry on with that. The only other thing I'd say, and I would try to be very brief in my comments about in my counselor corner thing, and the leadership thing was broadly framed. It wasn't it. It's I'm gonna write, but I'll be writing individual, and I've been a little busy lately with this other thing that I was doing. And I'm gonna write a letter to every one of you and tell you exactly, how I feel about you and how much I appreciate you. And finally, I would just say that I'll miss it. I'm now somebody whose life gets returned to them with no commitments, which is. But it's been great. It's really been great, and the level of dedication that people devote to this work is the public has no idea what it's like. And until you sit in the chair and sit here for hours and hear, the good, the bad, and the ugly, you will never really truly know. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Hamel.
I also have a non-action item
All right.
this evening. I took your plaque out of the box. I hope that's okay. I will keep my comments brief because I'm a notorious crybaby. And so I will just say, Nick, in recognition of your dedicated service to the town of Scarborough as a member of the Scarborough Town Council from November 2021 to November 2024, and council chair November 2023 to November 2024 is technically what your plaque says. Those of us that know you know that your years of dedication and service far exceed the dates on this plaque. And for that, we are grateful. On a personal level, I am incredibly grateful. I have loved our arguments and our friendship and our laughter, and for making me a better counselor. And so thank you for your service.
Thank you, April. Thank you. It's very kind. Do I say my stuff now? Or do I wait till Councilor comments? We can't. I was gonna say, are there any committee reports? Are we still doing committees? Are those over? It's over for me and Dawn. All right, so I actually wrote something because otherwise I would ramble and then wouldn't make sense. So I actually wrote this, so you have to bear with me a little bit. All right. So I want to thank the people that make this town work. To all the staff and volunteers that spent nearly 24 hours yesterday manning the polls, counting ballots, ensuring democracy works, say thank you. What you give to this community cannot be understated. To the employees to this town, for those that run our audio and visual, to the mechanics that fix the equipment, to the people that create our recreational programs, the teachers, the clerks, so many more. It's easy to overlook your contributions. Often we take it for granted, but I can assure you that we have one of the most professional and admirable staffs in the state. So thank you. To our department heads and key personnel, Tody, Liam, Norman, Angela, Todd, Autumn, Nick, Doug, Jennifer, Karen, Chief Holmquist, Chief Kindlin, and Superintendent Nato. Your presence instills a sense of stability and calm within this community. Your expertise and guidance and advice for those of us that make these difficult decisions, we appreciate all you offer us and all that you give to this community. To Tom. Pregnant pause. No. To Tom, I've often admired how you handled it all. You built the team that serves this community. You've instilled a sense of pride and the expectation of true professionalism from everyone here. You tirelessly give your time and your talents, and our community thrives because of your effort. I appreciate all the guidance and advice you've provided to this council. Your job is difficult. You answer to the council. You lead a large enterprise. You commonly answer inquiries from residents. You are the point of contact for our business community. You act as an intermediary between state, regional, and local initiatives. It's a full plate. You do it with dignity, and you do it with professionalism, and you do it so well. So for that, thank you. Councillor Seither. Councillor Seither, this was an adventure. You are steadfast, you are an incredibly capable person, and I know being in leadership with me was an adventure in of itself. You kept me up to date. You were always prepared. You were always committed to the task. You managed so many of the details, and I definitely consider you a friend and a confidant, and I will be forever grateful for helping me this past year. Most importantly, you kept me laughing through it all. And trust me, you need a sense of humor to do this job. So to you, I say thank you a million times over. To all my other colleagues here on the council, I want you to know that you're all very talented, and I learned something from each of you. We all know how difficult this position can be. We are the voice of the people. Often, people expect politicians to talk, and they usually do that so well. And yes, I can appreciate the irony of that statement. But before we talk, the most important thing to do is listen. Our job is to understand, and once we understand, we can act in the best interest of this community, both for the president, but for more importantly, for our future. I encourage this council, and the one that is to be seated shortly, to commit to always be better, to show everyone that good government is obtainable, that good government, led by good people, is the expectation, the very standard we must achieve. Disagreements are natural in this business. How we handle a disagreement is as important as the final outcome. The people we represent deserve leaders that shine when it appears that we are surrounded by darkness. To the people that elected me, supported me, and even disagreed with me, I thank you. Your voices are heard loudest here in this room. You matter the most here in this room. The fact that you watch, that you engage, that you speak up is a tribute to this community and to the embodiment of the American democracy. You are what makes it all worthwhile. So thank you. Gonna need those tissues back. Suddenly we're adjourned. No. I'd like to congratulate and welcome 3 new councilors, Bill Donovan, Scott Doherty, and Corey Fellows. This community is counting on you to act wisely, act in good faith, and continue to build the bonds that make Scarborough the greatest community in Maine. So thank you again, everyone.
Close enough.
We have Councilor Pump, so anyone something to add, please do, because I mentioned all of the efforts. Councilor.
So, Mr. Chair, at dinner the other night, I asked you how long you've been doing this, and I think you said like 13 years, and we talked a little bit about getting back to your kids and so forth. You know, it's one thing to do this job if you're a retired guy who, you know, whose wife appreciates him being out of the house a couple of times. It's an entirely different thing to be doing it while you're running a business, while you're raising children, while you're doing all of those other things. But that is a yeoman's work. And so I want to appreciate you for doing that. And Councilor Hamel, I can assure you that you will be right here, okay? But you will be whispering, okay?
Notice he shows his left shoulder instead of right shoulder.
Just be whispering, because, you know, you and I go back and forth on some issues, but fundamentally, I think we do agree on this notion of transparency, on engagement with the public, and so I just want to assure you that I, and perhaps one or two others on this dais, might be right there with you on certain issues. So thank you for your service.
Yeah, you know, Don, first, you know, we've been together for 4 years. We had the pleasure of partnering as chair and vice chair. I blame a lot of these gray hairs that are emerging to that time period.
Not an easy number two, I must admit.
The one thing about you in particular that I've always admired and respected is your tenacity and how you stick to your ground, and how in doing so, I feel like you've always pulled me to a compromised position. Even tonight, the Plovers, I was coming in ready to support it, but you brought your opinion, you gave a good argument, and you made me move a little bit to find that compromise. And I think you've done that a lot. You've represented that a lot on the council since I've been here. I think it's going to be a missed voice as we go forward. I hope with some of the new counselors. I will say everybody here definitely has their own opinions, strong opinions, really well justified, but you always kind of represented you know, a minority voice sometimes, and that's not easy to do. And I've always appreciated having you here, and appreciated my time with you as vice chair when we did that last year. Nick, what you just said, like, hands down, you are one of the best counselors this town will ever have. You may not be the most handsome chair that ever existed on the council, but I will definitely say perhaps one of the best chairs in my 4 years on this council. So I just thank you so much. I totally appreciate you taking time to focus on your personal life. I hope to see you again in some form or fashion, whether it's on the council, at a state level, or at some other level. We need people like you. The one thing I've heard, and I know it's been said a lot, but you make people comfortable. You make government approachable. You make it real. You make people feel good. You've made me feel good. And so I just really appreciate that about you, that you're just very special. And, you know, whatever happens next for you, I just wish you the best. And I know you're going to achieve it and go beyond, you know, anything that any of us would ever expect. So thank you.
Thanks, John. Councilor Shu.
Nick, you're going to be greatly missed. Really appreciate your job as chair this year. You run really great meetings. I appreciate the less work that we had as opposed to our former chair. But you're going to be missed, and I appreciate everything that you've done. And I know how long you've been volunteering for the town, so you will be missed. I hope you come back, maybe at a committee or something. Thank you. And then to Mr. Hamel, I have a huge thanks. I would not be sitting here today, but for you, and that is a fact. When I was on the zoning board, he started bugging me about what I was doing on zoning board. And then he's like, you should apply to planning board. And then I was very delusional one day, and he convinced me to run for town council.
I also told you it'd be a lot easier than ZBA.
You totally did. Big lie. But what I appreciate is the fact that we don't have the same point of view. We don't share the same opinions, but yet you constantly encouraged me to continue to do this. And so there's so much behind what that is. And I can't thank you enough, because again, I would not be here today for you. And I appreciate all of your guidance when I became on council. And I've learned so much. Huge shoes to fill for you being gone. And I don't know where we're going to be. We're going to be missed. Thank you guys, both of you.
Thank you, Karen. Any other council comments this evening? I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second? All in favor? I'm sure that is unanimous. Good night. It's the last bang right there. Gavel's down.